Morning, good afternoon, good day, everyone. My name is Nora Denzel, and I'm a current sitting board director on three public companies and then one nonprofit, which happens to be the National Association of Corporate Directors. And NACD in Northern California asked me if I would moderate a panel. I said, all right, what's the name of the panel? And they say the board's AI risk moment, who's accountable? I said, absolutely yes, because this is the first time I've seen the words AI risk management and accountable in the same sentence. So I'm thrilled to be here moderating because I myself need to understand what exactly we're supposed to be doing in the boardroom. So before I introduce the panel, I'll just tell you how I teed this up in my head is that in the boardroom, when I ask about AI and AI governance, I get what I'm going to call a reassuring narrative. People they come back with answers like we have a policy, we're following a framework, we train our employees, and we bought a tool. And I think that's fantastic. It's reassuring, and I call it vibe governance. I think that's very important from where we came from, because it's been over 1,000 days now since ChatGPT was unleashed on us. But I think in addition to the reassuring narrative, which I'm sure you all already have, in my mind, I'm thinking, who owns the outcome? What controls are in place? What evidence shows that they work? And for God's sake, can we ensure any of this risk? That's my job as a board director. And today we're going to try to get to move the needle a little bit from the reassuring narrative to defensible governance that talks about controls, audits. Will it stand up to a regulator or a plaintiff attorney? All right, enough of that. Please put your questions in the chat as we go. I'd like to introduce the panel because I'm going to put them in I know they want to introduce themselves, but the heck with them is I just want to introduce them the way that I thought of them when I was putting these questions together. First, the first person I'll call on in a minute is Matt Cassidy. If you just want to, he's from Grant Thornton. I call him the governance architect. He sees the internal control gaps, and he'll give us practical governance standards, and please God, tell us what good looks like. Second is Rich Harper. He's from Baker Botts. That's a law firm. I know you know that, and I call him the legal shield. He tracks all the enforcement signals. He's going to tell us about he's try not to scare us, but tell us all the terrible lawsuits and define for us the duty of care. Third up, he might be new to you. He was new to me last week, but now we're old friends. Emil Lassen. He's from this company that I had never heard of called the AI Underwriting Company. Never heard of it. AIUC. And they're trying to come out with a SOX-like subjective auditable standard for AI. And he'll tell you all about it. I just heard about it. I'm actually thrilled because I'm a person that does like regulation, because when you get brakes and seatbelts in a car, it just lets me go faster. And we're coming through an age of these AI people saying, oh, don't govern me. But I think if we want to go faster, we're going to have some kind of standard that we all agree to. And it's certainly not going to come from, well, let's not say that. Okay, and then fourth, this will be Joseph Talamaj. He's from Heffernan Insurance. So he's the safety net. He knows what's actually insurable. So you get a lot of vibe governance, but is it insurable? And what is the reality check on an AI failure? Does our current coverage support any of this? All right, that's the panel according to me. Enough of the housekeeping. Put your questions in the chat, and I'm going to start with Matt Cassidy on governance gaps. So Matt, where are you seeing the biggest gaps between what boards believe that their governance is and what would actually stand up to scrutiny? Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. And, thank you, Nora, for that introduction. Really excited to be here. I actually see some familiar faces, which is a good thing. But Nora, I loved when you said, right, you need brakes and a seatbelt to go fast. That is the key here. It really is, right? When you think about governance and what a board does, right, it's governance. And most of those processes were used to them being comprehensive and ensuring, right, the safety of the company. Same kind of concept here. A lot of the boards think that there's a lot of safeguards and mitigations and policies and procedures and maybe even a tool or two. But, what I think the biggest disconnect here is that you really need not only a robust governance process, but you also need something that moves quickly. Because what we've seen in, we've got a few years under our belt of AI, that in order to get a successful use case, it has to be a quick process, a thorough process that's really defining what ROI is and making sure that you're getting the actual value out of it. You're not just doing it because it's, your competitors are doing it. It's, the newest cool thing. But I think that's probably the biggest disconnect is understanding, the actual speed versus, what you're actually protecting yourself from, because sometimes you might actually be protecting yourself too much, right? You
Mm.
need to, yeah, take a little bit of risk depending on your risk tolerance, risk appetite, and all those things. But
So, so from the boardrooms you see, Matt, sorry to interrupt, but the boardrooms you see, like I felt comfortable with, we have a policy, we're
yeah,
following this, we're educating. But what's the most common false comfort directors on this call would have? Like I felt reassured during the terrible twos
yeah,
with Chat GPT, but now that it's 3 years old, we got to start. So
yeah.
what's the most, yeah, false comfort?
Yeah, I think that, having that robust process is kind of a false comfort, right? Because you might
Okay.
be missing out. What we've seen is that there are a lot of, especially large organizations that have a robust process. But what the board doesn't hear is that there are like 1,100 use cases that haven't even
Okay.
been processed because they're sitting on them and it takes them a week or two to go through two use cases.
Okay.
Now you've got 1,100 potentially use cases that could elevate the strategy, speed to market, all sorts of those things.
Okay.
So I think that's
So don't get
probably a big
confused
disconnect.
on like overall, like we've got a process or a great process doesn't mean that you can certify an outcome. All right, we're going to come back to you, Matt. Let's go to
Exactly.
Rich on the legal signals. So what's going on in the legal world, Rich? What legal or enforcement signals should we pay attention to now?
Like I think it depends on the hypothetical. It depends on, and it's all about risk management, right? And so the company itself will face risk depending on what the mistake or the behavior is in the marketplace. The company can face it whether you're talking about consumer deception statutes, whether you're talking about unfair practices statutes, especially at the state level. That can be one thing. You can another kind of stakeholder or somebody to keep an eye on is the vendors and the vendor relationships with your company, because those contracts are going to define a lot of the risk allocation between your company and others involved in that AI product. At the end of the day, there is risk that's being managed, of course, for you as directors. Um, some reassurance that from an oversight perspective, it takes relatively egregious circumstances right now in this setting with AI and kind of a cutting edge technology to start having a serious conversation about oversight failings. But what I would do is I'd echo, I think, Matt a little bit in terms of saying, look, in terms of those gaps, it's your role, it's your talent is to probe management with respect to what those gaps are and to be kind of trying to figure out where those are. And that can help minimize the risk that we're talking about, whether it's to the company, that relationship that you have with your vendors, or for the
Mhm.
directors.
So do you see any, we'll let you do, I shouldn't say that, but some lawyers like to regale us with the stories. Is there been any litigation or wasn't there some group from the SEC that was supposed to look for like technology hype? Have you seen any litigation or any case law or anything that we might not be aware of because we don't follow this as closely as you do that we could learn from?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things that kind of come to mind. One is maybe talked about a little bit more in the press, one a little less. In the press, I guess I think about, especially with respect to public companies, what are the disclosures with respect to how a company is using, developing, putting AI out into the marketplace. Whether there's different kinds of washing nicknames for what we're talking about here. It comes from some of the environmental kind of social disclosures in the last few years, and people were overstating what they were doing. Same here. The SEC is looking for companies in terms of their disclosures and whether folks are overstating what they're doing with respect to AI or misstating what they're doing with respect to AI. So in one sense, that's, I think, something I think a lot about, and I think folks are looking at when it comes to kind of the risk management standpoint of regulators and litigators. I fall back to the one that's less talked about again is I think about a lot in terms of directors' obligations, oversight obligations, the fact that if there's a committee, an interdepartment committee on AI in place, that's a good thing. But it really is your obligation to be thinking about how those efforts line up with what the company's core principles are. And that's part of kind of your oversight function, whether you want to call it a care mark duty or something else. And that's kind of what I keep coming back to, is something that's practical and that directors need to be thinking about, I think, in real time.
Okay, and then one thing, let me just pick on one thing you said. You talked about AI washing. Can you give
Yeah.
us either a hypothetical or a real case? Is it, I'm just thinking if I'm on an enterprise software company, we could be overstating the new agent we put out, or is it
Or
more,
the capabilities. Look, at the end of the day, what the SEC is concerned about is that you're sending proper signals to the marketplace regarding the financial health of your company and what you're doing. And the problem can be one of a number of problems on this front can be, and the washing problem can be that you'll overstate the capabilities of the AI and the impact it's going to have on revenue and where the path is going. And it can be seen as hyping your own company's financials and
oh,
overstating
oh,
what you're going to actually be doing. And
okay,
so you've got to be realistic in your disclosures. Most company disclosure counsel are pretty good about weighing or balancing kind of the upside with the risk. Talk about disclosing risk all the time. So it's manageable. But that's kind of how I think about it
okay.
is when you're talking about your AI developments, you're overhyping them and in a
Mhm.
sense pushing up your stock price on the
Okay,
margin when it's not when there's risk to it. There's more
okay.
risk that you're disclosing. You
Has
got to get that
anybody been
balance.
prosecuted on AI washing yet? Is there any case I can Google and see? I just wonder if
Yeah.
somebody's ever been through it.
Yeah, well, there are activities, there are
Oh,
announced investigations of folks that have taken
okay.
place, typically settlements that have taken
Okay.
place
But
regarding
any
it.
any company name I could just put in like, Revlon and then see it. Or that's okay. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I'll find
Got it.
while everybody's going on.
Okay.
I'll find, but no one like Google.
Okay. All right.
Fair
Okay.
enough.
All right. Let's go on to Emil. He might be new to you. Maybe he isn't. Maybe you guys all knew this. Maybe in the chat you could tell us if you had ever heard of what is it? Oh my God.
Yeah,
UAICY,
AI UC,
whatever.
not
Emil,
easy to
what
say.
company are you? When was it formed? Who the heck, who's funding it? And why should I care about you? So go ahead.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for having me, Nora. We actually clearly the new guys on the block. We started the AI underwriting company. We came out of stealth this summer, but we've been working on things a bit longer. Um, Taking a step back, this stuff is just moving so fast right now. And the analogy you created with seatbelts is exactly the analogy we're going for as well. When new technology has hit society historically, industry has been the ones moving in front to create new standards, new solutions. So we've basically created the AI underwriting company to bring the same flywheel we've seen when it came to fire risk and insurance, when it came to seatbelts and airbags for the car industry and so forth. The same flywheel that consists of three things that basically enable society to adopt new technology in a safe and secure way. That flywheel has three components. The first is we need to agree on the standards. So we've created a standard that talks about AI agent security, safety, and reliability. 50 requirements to the folks building AI agents that we shape, and I'll talk a bit more about how we shape those requirements in a second. The second element is it's easy for me as an agent builder to talk about upholding that standard, but I wouldn't trust me and I wouldn't trust what I'm saying. We need some kind of third-party validation. So the second part of that flywheel is auditing against the standard. We have third-party auditors going in and checking that companies actually meet the requirements. And what we can now do in the world of AI is we don't just check boxes in terms of the documents they produce and give us. We actually go in and test the agents and try to break them in 1,000 different ways. So if the company building an AI agent says that they can issue refunds and they won't issue the wrong refund and they will only issue the right refunds, we go in and test that functionality. We try to break it in 1,000 different ways. And only if we can't break it do we issue the certificate. The final bit of the flywheel is insurance. AI is probabilistic. It's quite different from a lot of the technology we've worked with so far. You can't remove all risk, then these AI agents become so dumb that they're not useful anymore. So we need to accept that to use this new technology in a meaningful way and in a productive way, we need to mitigate that residual risk. And that's where insurance has come in historically, and where insurance will also play a big role in AI adoption. So
Okay.
Nora, you should care if you want to actually start adopting AI, not just talking about adopting AI. And we hope that our framework can help enterprises basically move that forward.
Okay, so when I got introduced to you last week, all right, so it's a for-profit company that's a startup, AIUC1,
Yeah,
and who's helping you write the standards?
yeah.
Yeah,
Great question. So to write a good standard, you need two things. You need to talk very closely to the folks you're trying to help.
yeah.
In our case, that's the Fortune 500 CISOs, the folks who've been pointed at by their CEOs and told, we need to adopt this AI and we need to do it yesterday. And they're also the folks who are going to lose their jobs. These board directors here will be the ones firing them when they need someone to blame because things didn't go out right. So we've basically gathered now 75 CISOs and security leaders from the Fortune 500 in a consortium. And we get together with them every single month to understand what are the risks that prevent them from adopting AI. That helps us understand what are the things we need to cover. We then take those risks to a group of technical contributors. These are the organizations you trust when it comes to technical security. That's Cisco, it's IBM, it's MIT, it's Stanford, it's MITRE, it's the Cloud Security Alliance. And we then throw these challenges up to this group and ask them, how do we create requirements that can mitigate these risks? And collectively, that became AIUC1.
Okay. And are you the only, so you kept talking about agents. So I was thinking, all right, we'll get a customer sat agent. We'll tell them, here's your objective, improve customer sat. The agent is working great in the beginning, and then all of a sudden it realizes if you shrink the time between when the customer asks for a refund and gets it, they get happier. So he just decided, or the chap just decides to refund everybody that uses the word refund in their chat with it. And I've just lost $100 million because it went viral. So that's what you are testing against the agent. Like, so if my agent was UAIC1 certified, or it would have been insurable because it had your standardization, and I would have probably been able to recover the money. And you're thinking, if I didn't, am I thinking right?
You're thinking about it completely correctly. We literally did this test of one of the largest customer service companies in the world 2 weeks ago. They came to their customer service agent that is deployed across like hundreds of companies, thousands of companies around the world. And they wanted to know if this agent exactly could go rogue, for example, on refunds. We tested it. We actually did find some vulnerabilities. We went back to them and told them about those vulnerabilities. They mitigated them. Then we do the testing again. We made sure that the agent was secure this time around. And that is what's enabling them now to show it. And we write this up in an audit report that is shared and transparently. So this is the piece of paper that we hope can unblock sales, because they can prove that trust.
So to me, you're a layer above. So we started with, look, I follow a NIST framework. I've got a policy. I educate my employees. I'm buying from a vendor. I changed my contract with the vendor so I understand what I'm, and then I've got some insurance. And then you are, if I've got agents, especially if they're customer facing, I want another layer, and you'd be another layer on top of that. Okay, we'll come back. So you're like Underwriters Laboratory when electricity was new?
Exactly. Like that's why we're called the AI underwriting company. Ben Franklin is a big hero of ours.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, because so that be what you do, so consumer would buy a poster. All right, Joe, the insurance guy. We didn't mean to leave you out. God, for God's sake, we live to talk about cyber and D&O insurance. I mean, I speak for all the board members on this call. So, Joe, how are insurers underwriting AI risk today? I mean, basically, look, we got a cyber policy. We got D&O. Aren't we covered, dude? I mean, what do I need to worry about now?
Thank you, Nora. And I love these questions. They're very direct, they're very explicit, and you're really getting to the heart of the problem. Broadly speaking, the insurance industry hasn't really addressed it for the past couple of years because things have moved so quickly. However, that's changed today. And we're in this moment in time where we're moving from insurance policies being silent in and around AI matters. And there's two camps happening, depending on the coverage line, depending on the insurance carrier. One camp is affirmatively excluding it. And the Insurance Standards Organization has adopted AI exclusionary language that insurance carriers can use. And there's many insurance carriers that are adopting this language and affirmatively just not covering AI related matters. There's another camp that is affirmatively covering AI and looking to seize on the opportunity to address this risk, underwrite this risk, and in ways that Emil had just referenced before, quantify how we view this risk and provide insurance capital behind the risk. The questions that we're seeing, you asked me, how are companies underwriting for this? There are different questions specifically about the AI model. And I think one of the first areas is to figure out, do you even have AI agents operating autonomously in your organization today? Like, let's just start there. Or is your organization using AI with humans in the loop? And then the question is maybe different. And that goes more to the skill set that your organization is providing to your employees to use the information being provided by the agents. And I think that's a less technical question and more of a governance question. What awareness do you have around an employee that might be using 2 or 3 agents, prompting them? Are you 100% certain that they've received the proper training to take that information, deliver it to a customer in a way that it's been validated and checked, as opposed to what might be the easier thing to do, which is just take that information and send it across to the customer because the work is piling up and the AI agents make it very easy? How do you think about those controls and the training that you're giving to your employees? So those are the things that we're seeing our underwriters ask about. When you talk about these new markets that are popping up, AIUC1, but there's others that will specifically target AI risk, they're asking different questions about that risk than our traditional underwriters. And the questions are more specific about the type of model that is looking to be insured. What's the use case for the model? What's the file location and the source of the model? What's the target model metric percentage that you're seeking to accomplish? How are you defining a material change in that model? Really specific definitions on the insurance policy so that they can trigger a loss on the policy, because none of the current insurance policies in the market today have that language in them. And so they're just excluding it with these AI exclusions. And sometimes they're not even telling you that the AI exclusion is on there. We've had multiple renewals come through on our book of business where there's an AI exclusion or maybe a name, likeness, and music exclusion because they just don't want anything to do with the intellectual property risk. They won't even tell you sometimes that these exclusions are being added onto the policies. So if you're a director and you haven't asked the question, are there any new AI exclusions on any of our insurance policies that we should be aware of? That's probably a good place to start to see if your trading partners, your insurance company trading partners, are adding AI exclusions that might have an impact on your company.
All right, so all right, let's just unpack this bag. Oh my goodness. All right, so we've got cyber and we have D&O. And when I look through the policies, I never really I see words like technology, but I don't see AI in there. So first, what you're telling me is they might, and you didn't mean this, but they might have snuck in an AI exclusion already, and I need to be aware of that. So first of all, if I have a policy that doesn't have the words AI in it, is that silent mean that I'm not covered if AI made the decision that I acted on and did the thing that lost the money?
Not necessarily.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that's a good question and a good distinction. So if you're a technology company, the standard of care for a technology errors and omissions policy is a little bit different than if you're a
Okay.
non-technology company.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and I would say that the language in a technology errors and omissions policy is pretty broad and inclusive and
Okay.
has a lot of the things and is probably being customized to address whatever technology that you are delivering.
Okay. So if I stop there, so then that's how I felt as a director, as a technology.
Yeah.
If you're in technology, if you're not in technology, it's a little bit different. Okay. Then what you're saying is those same vendors that sold me that insurance might be giving me a renewal, and they may or may not have told me that in this renewal, we've explicitly carved out AI and we put some fences around it that if you're doing this type without this,
Mhm.
so they'll do a specific carve out saying it isn't covered, which may make me get an AI policy like I have a cyber writer, kind of like a cyber policy on top. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And we've actually seen this specifically on technology errors and emissions policies, where the intent of the expiring coverage was to pick up this risk, but this, intellectual property, name, likeness,
Yeah.
music exclusion just magically appeared on our renewal. We didn't ask for it. Nobody mentioned anything. It just came through.
Okay.
And, because we had a proper reference check through the renewal process, we said, hey, what's going on with this? What is this? What's the intent of this? And it caused for an underwriting discussion to dive into the IP controls within that organization to get an understanding that, hey, these are the controls in place. Okay, we can remove the exclusion. You're doing what you need to do.
Okay.
And now you have the coverage that you used to have before. So
Okay.
they're doing it as a mechanism to control what's ending up on their balance sheet because they don't want this risk without underwriting it.
I see.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so this was a great overview from the four of you. Let's go a little bit deeper, and then we're also looking at questions from the chat. Although this is a chatty group, so let's see. I will come back to that. All right. So number two, Emil, where do you think companies think they're AI ready but fail when they're measured against standards? Where do you again, it was kind of what I was asking before of like, where do I have this false sense of comfort?
Yeah, great question. Let's answer it in three levels. I think the first place is good governance. Do you have the processes in place to make good decisions? This is where some of the classic standard frameworks we know, like ISO, can help you. Some organizations have also tried to implement NIST, but at the end of the day, these are quite high level. It's still important. So good governance is, I think, the first level. The next level is your technical safeguards. This is where we don't have frameworks yet. And when asked like, why another standard? Then this is really why we decided to do this work, because we need something that is technically grounded, that gathers all these risks in one framework. And when it comes to things like jailbreaks or hallucinations or prompt injections, these things that we see in the headlines now every day, but we still don't know exactly how to incorporate risks like low safeguards against, that's then what we're trying to capture, and where we meet a lot of AI builders who are very confident that their agents will pass with flying colors, but where the audits will always reveal vulnerabilities. The last bit I'll mention briefly is your supply chain. I think Rich mentioned this as well. Like this new space is full of new versions of supply chain. You have your models provided by OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and so forth. You need to make sure that what you promise your customer is followed by those suppliers as well. And this new whirlwind of tools is poorly managed at a lot of organizations. And this is also a place where we often raise remarks when we go through the audit process with companies.
Okay, so the bottom is, so if you've done nothing or you are beginning on the journey, make sure there is, what framework are you using, and get kind of what I was calling the reassuring story of, we're educating our employees. Then you're saying you layer on top of that, but then the third party risk is the thing is you're relying on someone else's agent. And what are the things they're warranting it against and for? And that's probably where they're going to come to you as well, right? If you have like we have Workday, we have all the same, enterprise software everyone else has. So does like a Workday come to you and then certify their agent with you, AI UC1, and then that will give me assurance when I take it that it's governed against hallucinations and rogue.
Yeah, so really we work with organizations in two ways. For the folks building and deploying AI agents, they come to us to earn that certification.
Okay.
Some organizations, we're working with a major bank, well, it's not signed yet, but it's hopefully kicking off very soon. Say, like, think a top 10 bank in the world. They want to certify their internal agents. This bank is so big that when they deploy software like agents internally, they want that reassurance that the agent actually works also when it's facing employees. But otherwise, we are working with the classic vendors like Intercom, for example, when it comes to customer service. We work with UiPath when it comes to automation. They come to us to certify the agent.
Okay.
The other type of organization we work with is these larger organizations, your Workdays, your Microsofts, your JP Morgans. They come to us because they need that overarching AI framework, and particularly need a framework for evaluating their vendors. And here, AIUC1 is an open source framework. It's completely free to use. All we're asking organizations to do is to basically use this framework to ask their vendors if they have the certificate or not. So a way to take a complex vendor questionnaire and try to boil it down to one question.
So if I ask that in the boardroom, like maybe the CISO or somebody's in there, are they going to push back and say, look, your standard AI UC1 is competing with 50 others, so we don't want to use that one? Or are you the only game? Because I know there's so many nuances in this. Are you the only AI agent certification? Will you be the SOC 2 standard for for agents?
It's not up to us to decide, right? But
Okay.
we're the only one that is technically grounded. You can require ISO certifications of your vendors that will tell you that they have a good grasp of governance, but it
Okay.
won't tell you if the agent works in the real
Okay.
world. You our like again, we've been around for half a year. Whenever
Yeah.
we knock on the door of a Fortune 500 CISO, they tend to lower their shoulders and breathe out
Yeah.
because they're like, oh, I've been looking for something like this, right? We've been able
Yes.
to get 75 of them in the room already
Mhm.
because they're scrambling. This is moving so fast right now, and having one shared industry-led collaboration where they
Yeah.
can come
Well,
together and set these requirements that
we
seems to
all
help them.
want it. What I would do if you came into us, I'd say, who's your founder? Like who
Yeah.
is?
No, so sure, happy to speak to those. So we have two founders at AAUC. One is Rajat Patani. He was at McKinsey for 10 years, leading their insurance practices, and is coming basically with this understanding of how enterprises work with risk.
Mhm.
And the other founder, Rune Quist, our CEO, was at Anthropic. He was their first go-to-market and product
Oh,
lead.
okay.
So he came to
He was the
Anthropic when
founding
these
part of
models were starting
Anthropic?
to. Exactly. He was a
Okay.
very early days. He's not a co-founder, but very early days. So
Okay.
combining someone who knows enterprise
Mhm.
risk and AI
Okay.
at the frontier is basically what we're trying to do.
Okay. No, that's very helpful. And that to me passes the sniff test. And even though it's early days, we've been telling boards to self-govern for a while until the state and the federal, until we get real guardrails. But do things that if you're ever reported in the paper that you're not ashamed of until we can get some guardrails. So we really do want guardrails, and I'm hoping, but I'm glad he came from Anthropic. That's fantastic. All right. So Rich, let's go. One of the biggest frustrations I have is when AI harm occurs, where does accountability break down between the board, management, third parties? And then as a follow-up, what's the first thing you'd expect on a request from a regulator if they had a subpoena, if we had a problem? What artifact do you think we have that we don't?
Okay, a lot there. First, I've been staring at the chat, Nora, so let me help out a little bit on that. So shout out to Mariel Reintz for a nice job in terms of a couple of the SEC investigations. I'd also point out, in addition to the ones that she named, one that I find interesting and like to talk about, it involves Nate Inc. And that was because that company arguably overstated its AI capabilities to try to raise money. And so there's that fraud aspect of overstating the capabilities in order to actually raise money from it. And a shout out to Lisa Yao with respect to an article in terms of SEC proposed AI washing guidelines. Turning to your questions in terms of back to the gaps and where they tend to be, I see them, I think, similar to others who have been talking. It's you've got management is on the ground putting in place its AI governance plans and the like. And to me, it's the obligation or the responsibility of the board to really be probing with respect to questions. And when you're asking kind of what those issues are, those questions are, to me, it's asking whether you want to stick with the AI washing a bit, asking about what are the risks that are being disclosed to the public in terms of what people are doing, whether it's asking about one I like to focus on is vendors. What vendors are material to your business, and then really try to understand what's going on with respect to the rights between your company and that vendor, and how you're managing that in terms of data ownership and potential risk, IP risk, the like that comes along for that. So the to me, I think the short answer is in terms of a breakdown that I see, it's typically it's management kind of again saying what it's doing at some level, but then it's that failure to probe in terms of directors that can create a challenge. And I continue to kind of push for directors to really ask what they think are probing questions of the management team. In terms of if somebody comes knocking on your door, the short answer is whether you're talking about regulators or you're talking about plaintiffs' lawyers in the civil context, they're really the first request that they're looking for are really trying to get the story. They can't see behind your walls in terms of what efforts you were doing, especially the government. And so the government is going to try to move pretty quickly to find out what your story is. And so when you talk about things like industrial governance versus kind of a softer, If you've got a more industrial governance in place, it's a little more strenuous, a little bit more rigorous. That gives you that ability to move quicker and more efficiently for getting out your story to the regulators if something goes wrong.
Okay, and then, sorry, let me do one. I asked one of my friends, I told her I was doing this panel. She said,
Yeah.
Glass Lewis signaled they may recommend voting against directors if oversight is insufficient. So we
Yeah.
want to ask you, Rich, does the buck stop with the audit chair or the full board? Now that's for a friend. I'm asking for a friend.
Full board, different directors have different responsibilities, right?
Mhm.
So the audit committee is going to have its responsibilities, and even the audit committee's responsibilities can vary a bit from company to company, right? In terms of what it's tasked with.
Mhm.
But typically, I think all directors, taking a step back, have a responsibility for oversight, at least at some high level, with respect to AI governance, with respect to AI developments. They've got to be asking questions. You don't have to be an AI specialist in order to do it. The audit committee, some companies have AI committees, subcommittees. Some company boards have kind of more of an IT data subcommittee. Those types of committees are going to have more significant responsibilities, right? With respect to kind of how they look into and ask questions. But I think the consistent theme, that the real takeaway to me is that regardless of what committee, subcommittee you're on, it really is your responsibility to ask those questions to see if what is actually taking place on the ground is taking place and how that lines up with kind of what your priorities are as a director.
All right. So then, Matt, if you could just, you can wave a wand and you can mandate just one governance mechanism you'd love to see in 2026 to materially improve oversight, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a really good and kind of a tough question because I got to just pick one thing. But I'd maybe even pivot that on what should, directors be asking, right? What's the number one question? And there's really two, but they're kind of inextricably linked. The question really is, what is the ROI on this, right? What am I going to get out of it, right? What am I going to invest in it? What's going to be the ROI, whether it's customer engagement or hard dollars or time saved, whatever it is, you've got to really align that, decide it, make sure it's measurable. And then also looking at that from kind of a different angle, and all the regulations talk about this, right? Whether it's EU AI Act or anything that's been proposed in the US, is what is the customer harm? Right? That's what everybody keys in on. A lot of the controls, like Emil was talking about, like NIST framework, things like that, they're all focused on, what's the external impact of this? So, if you can look at the ROI and say, listen, here's our cutoff point. This is when we're going to pull the plug because we're not realizing that ROI. One of the feeds into that should really be customer impact. If it's a positive impact, right, that should be a measure that kind of feeds into maybe the hard dollars, but also pulling the plug when it could potentially cause customer harm. And sometimes even customer harm could be misinterpreted, right? A lot of, maybe the older generations that are used to talking to a person, right? Making banking personable or insurance personal, they might be harmed in a way where they just want to call their agent and talk to somebody, right? As opposed to some of the younger crowd, they just want to go into the website, get life insurance coverage and move on. Right. So there's different kind of impacts of customer harm. There's definitely a different legal implication on customer harm that I'm sure Rich can talk to ad nauseum. But really harming your customer on the experience that they're having as well is something I'd be asking. But again, these are questions that directors already know, right? How is my customer going to be impacted? What's the impact to the organization? Are we going to make money on this? What's the result of it?
Okay. And so when you and Rich and the others were talking, I was thinking, all right, on the AI journey and governance that I've been through personally on the number of boards I serve on, first of all, we had to have the meeting. We had to have the talk. And the talk is, what is the board's role in the governance of technology? And we didn't call it just AI because tomorrow morning there'll be something new. And so we said, all right. So and now the prequel to that was we all needed to get educated. And so we put an education plan together that didn't rely only on management. because we realized management's coming up to speed at the same time we're coming up to speed. So it's okay. I mean, they should always be a little bit ahead of us, which is true, but we also asked for company generated education materials. We used NACD because we were members on my boards. We also used other institutions that you're all familiar with. Some of these, some of our sponsors on this call. It's absolutely fine. You want to get just like you have a board that's diverse, you want education that's diverse. So we all had like a fundamental understanding, some deeper than others, of what is it we're talking about here, and why is this different than other technology, and isn't this just like another SAP rollout? And so that was the first 2 years of the greasy kind of kid stuff after ChatGPT came out. So before you have the meeting, the talk is what is our role in the governance of technology? You have that talk, and then you cut it up into what committee gets what piece of it. And we did a charter audit. And so each of our charters got changes to them in the regularly scheduled update cycle of what's your role. So NomGov really had to step up from once a year director of education to ongoing education, and this is what it means and how many should be certified and whatever. Comp talked about the whole skills retraining and what are the risks with employees and the skill gap, et cetera. Audit was all around like the inputs and the outputs. How do we certify the data going in? And so what's the governance model on the data? Does it get mixed with other data? Does it play well with others? So just the same rigor we had around cyber, we needed to understand, because if the logic wasn't coming from our employees' heads, it came from understanding what was the nuances in the data. And if the data wasn't clean, then the agent's not going to behave. So we put a whole governance mechanism around data. And then what we're talking about today is the governance mechanism around the outcomes. And so, as you all know AI, data goes in, code doesn't even really get written. You can't inspect it and it can't tell you how it did it. And then outcome comes out, and who's responsible for the outcome, and what are the control mechanisms for that outcome. So I would say somebody in the chat was asking about, what should we do tomorrow? I would say these things is, if you feel kind of, what are some activities we could do as a board? I think if you're not quite sure, data governance is always a good bet, because your data most likely is a mess. Most companies' data is. The second thing that's a deadly, silent but deadly killer is tech debt. Nobody likes to ever talk about it. All it means, it's just the same thing in your city. Potholes, the bridge is old. We know that it's all the same stuff. So there's an infrastructure in your IT that's getting old. And even though we don't know what governance is, what the federal government or the state government's going to do, we don't know tomorrow morning. Even the people in technology don't know what's happening all the time. We do know that if you're not resilient and you're not fit technology-wise, you're going to be left behind. So if you have a brittle system, a system that's no longer supported, you just want to carve out some percentage of your IT budget and just say, look, just start repairing the roads and bridges, because we know you're going to have to do that, because AI is a weapon of mass destruction, I should say. So tech debt, governance, and then have the meeting that I just talked about, and maybe refresh the charters. And then from that, what I've seen is a flywheel start to take. But I've seen a lot of boards reluctant of just like, I'm not even sure how to have the meeting, what I should ask, what the questions are. And I think this seminar is a good first step. And you can also bring outsiders to help educate you, follow somebody's framework, et cetera. So that was my contribution as a director to this panel. And please feel free to follow on. And any comments from you guys at the panel, or I'll just keep going. I mean, I still have more. Anything I say, Matt or Rich or Emil or Joe, that I left out?
Those are all good. Yeah, those are definitely all good of all that.
Okay.
I did want to comment. You mentioned about compliance, Nora, and as an insurance broker, we get requests all the time from our clients asking us, hey, are we in compliance with this contract?
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side, we advise our clients, hey, have a standard tier of insurance requirements for certain vendors. If this vendor is doing X, then you should ask for these things for insurance. If you are deploying AI agents in your organization and it's going to have a material impact on your organization, and you haven't reviewed that compliance process to see if there are checks in the compliance process in and around AI related matters for insurance, that's something that should be done. Like you're probably sitting on top of a vendor compliance stack
Yeah.
that is outdated
Yeah.
because the old insurance requirement language do not meet the requirements of today, especially given this evolving environment where underwriters are just throwing AI exclusions on the program. The other thing to consider too is that the scale of risk is very different today, depending on what that AI agent does. And so where your limit requirement might have been $5 million for a particular vendor of a particular revenue size, depending on the function of that agent, the impact of the risk on your organization, that may change your view on how much insurance limit you might want that vendor to carry for that specific function. So I would say just doing a revamp and a review of your compliance process specifically around insurance matters is probably a good idea as well.
Right, we can do it under the regularly scheduled DNO. Okay. So
And Nora,
maybe-
just a quick
Yes,
comment.
Rich, go ahead.
Good discussion in the chat regarding different committees that are getting tasked with the responsibilities these days. But I want to come back to your point, which I think is really excellent, which is not only is it putting a process in place for your board, but it's almost culturally getting your board used to talking about these issues. For those of us who find the geekiness of quantum computing interesting, that could be tomorrow's problem, right? And the key to me is to having that kind of culture built up in your board that's already talking about these issues, data, technology, whether that's AI or otherwise, so that it's ready as these new issues are coming along. You don't know what that issue is going to be for your particular company tomorrow. Or if you haven't had that first, as you described it, that first kind of fundamental tech talk amongst your board and build off of it, it just makes it harder later on to kind of catch up.
And I saw in the chat, and I'll put an advertisement for the NACD. There's an NACD event. Is the Blue Ribbon Commission report last year's, not the current one. The one before was the board's role in the governance of technology, and it just brings up, should you have a tech committee? Should you not? And I've actually seen it went from less than 10% in the mid 20s, and now it's like at the low 30s. A lot of companies are. Does it mean yours should? Don't know, but we put in to be or not to be, what is the question? And here's a sample charter if you do it. But one of the other things you have to address also with the talk is, do you have air to ground coverage on technology in your board the same way you have it on finance? So I'm old enough to remember prior to the regulations coming in, Sarbox, et cetera, we didn't even need to have qualified financial experts. We could have them. They was kind of like an optional fun to have. And now we have a standing commitment that we have to identify who's our qualified financial expert and make sure that they're on audit. There's no such thing as a qualified technology expert. It doesn't have anything to do with age. In my head, it's kind of like when you were introduced and imbued in the technology. So you have some people that don't know life without the internet and a screen that, they have that. And then you have others that were introduced to it in their 70s. So age has nothing to do with it. It's more like what is your technical acumen? And what I mean by that is I learned about like the biology acumen in the pandemic. Some people just understood right away what all this stuff meant, like I don't remember the white cells and the T cells and the B cells or whatever they were. And other people really had to kind of memorize that. And there's nothing wrong with either side. So you have some people that just love the technology, but you don't need all technologists, nor do you want them on your board. But you want to be able to, all of you need to ask, just like we do now in finance, the high level question, what's the risk? What's the ROI? We can all ask that. But you need 2 or 3 people that can peel underneath. So on our boards, for example, in finance, I'm good enough, but we've got 2 or 3 members that can get to the broker level of detail if we're doing a share buyback. And so that's what I mean by air to ground coverage on technology, are people that when someone says, we're using open source rather than, than this or whatever, and that 2 or 3 people understand what the second, third, and fourth order effects are. And it doesn't have to be all of you. And I also think we all should just be using it. There's nothing, because I know when I try to explain like if you go to the Las Vegas Sphere to someone, if you've seen an event there, it's very hard to explain to someone that's never been there what it's like. And they keep asking and asking it. And I really think it's hard to govern things that you don't really understand. Because we've all seen property, plant, equipment, etc. But if you've not used one, it's very hard to have those levels. So see if you have air to ground coverage in governance on the board. And then, so one of the questions in the chat was, do you have this as a standing agenda item? What I've seen in the maturation on some of my boards is after the initial meeting and the kind of the parsing out of who owns what piece of this, then it's part of their meetings. And we don't have a big meeting all the time. It's kind of ongoing, and an infrastructure and a flywheel gets set up. But I see the most reluctance is like, okay, I hear all this stuff in the media. I'm not sure who to believe and what should we be doing. So I think educate yourself, have the meeting, and then have ongoing board education. What else? Anything from Matt or Emil? Because I've got more
If I can jump on that, Nora, and connecting it slightly back to what Joe talked about before as well. I think this discussion on capabilities is just so important, because obviously, yes, we need to be compliant, and that is the first step. But when you are compliant, the next step is that you want to win. You want your companies to win. That's why you're sitting on their boards. And the important thing of this AI stuff is that the better you understand your risks and the better you manage them, the better you can do it. It's back to the seatbelts. The better the seatbelt, the faster you can drive. So reframing AI risk management from compliance to a competitive differentiator, I think will, like the boards who manage to do that in their boardrooms, I think will be the organizations who will win in 2026 and who will really unlock the benefits of AI. It's back to what Joe talked about. If you can't trust the AI agent to answer a simple customer question, then you definitely won't trust it with handling a refund. But if you can actually make it handle your refunds as well, then you start really unlocking value, saving potentially tons of money, right?
Super.
And I'll second Emil's comment on that, Nora, because I can validate that the clients that come to me asking for $200 million of insurance are the ones that are going places.
Those are the seatbelts that they. All right, so let's do this. We'll do your speed round on what's the one questions directors should ask management in 2026 to separate real AI strategy from reassuring narratives. Like if you this, and that was pretty much the gist of the chat, was what should I be asking in the boardroom? And then as a bonus, just what do you read to keep current, or what do you recommend directors read or do, or if you had one resource recommendation? And this will all be wrapped up together. You guys will get a post-program email from NACD. So you don't have to spell the name of the book you're going to cite or whatever. So who's going to be the first victim? What if I do alphabetical order according to first name? I think that's Emil. Emil, what's the one question directors should ask management in 2026, separating real AI strategy from narratives? And you're giving your mother some advice on what to read, or just to stay more, one piece of advice. Go ahead.
Yeah, without touting our horn too much, we've spent a lot of time developing this standard as a tool, free to use for board directors and management to adopt AI with safety, security, and reliability in mind. So I would ask your board, like your management, how are you going to adopt AI securely, and are you using the frameworks out there to help you? What I'd recommend reading, I think Anthropic is putting out fantastic and very thoughtful pieces on the intersection of AI capabilities, so where we are and what these things can actually do, but also the safety and security lens, like how are we integrating this in society in a meaningful way? How is it going to impact our economy more generally? I think having that fundamental understanding of where this extremely powerful technology is will just enable you to participate in these discussions. I think Anthropic is doing great stuff, yeah.
Is there a person in particular, or is there a substack? When you say Anthropic, I'm just
yeah, I think like Dario's essays in general are great, but I think Anthropic as a company is putting out fantastic stuff through their LinkedIn and email channels.
I will say this.
I'd start there.
Okay, so I'll say this: where we are for the enterprise, Anthropic seems to be the one we're using for into enterprise scale, and then there's a consumer side. But on the enterprise-wide, if your company's using it, AI, it's probably Anthropic. And you're saying, take a look at what the materials they put out. Super.
Exactly. And it's back to the value, right? They have reframed
Okay.
security into the competitive
Yes.
advantage.
Okay, yeah, and that's what they're trying to differentiate on. Yeah, so they've really been that way since the beginning. All right, let's say J, or I don't know. I'll just do Matt because I'm not quite sure what letter comes next. Matt.
That's okay. Yeah, I mean,
One question. Go ahead.
yeah, one question, I'll skip on the ROI thing because I've beaten that one to death. But, I think that, it's such an important thing to tie any technology to strategy and what other options you have that might be more safer and secure. So I would say, what else, right? I know it's a little counterintuitive to we're all in on AI, but maybe what else could do this, right? Do we need AI or is it being AI washed, right? Where it's new software, it's got AI in it, really? Like, show me. So I would maybe ask kind of a challenging question, right? Being that counterparty on it.
Okay.
And then, I agree with reading Anthropic. One of the newsletters that I read, I got their certification about a year and a half ago, a company called Babel AI. It's a really detailed course, really good, very similar to, I'm sure, what Emil and team are doing. But there's so much good content out there. I don't think there's a bad thing to read. I try to absorb as much as I can. But yeah, my recommendation would be Babel or anything from
Okay.
Emil and team.
Great. Awesome. All right, we got Rich and Joe. So Rich, Joe, we'll let you go last.
Sure. So, question I change over time as to questions to ask. One that I'm focused on right now, it's kind of a theme for me, is I feel like AI is just more and more external in terms of your business relationships. So, a question I'd like to have asked is what to management is what are the material relationships, vendor relationships, business partnerships that you've got that have an AI component to them, and what guardrails do you have in place? What kind of safeguards do you have to be monitoring and understanding how different people are using your data and how you're controlling for risk? In terms of, I'll give you the most shallow answer in terms of kind of something to look to for a little bit of information on AI. I like a lot. There's a daily podcast called the AI Daily Brief. It's about 5 minutes on news, 10 minutes on a deep dive onto a topic for that day. I like it. It's good for building vocabulary over time.
Okay. Awesome. All right, Joe, take us home, dude.
Awesome. Thank you, Nora. And thank you again for being such a great moderator. So I would say, if you're on a board and you have AI deployed within your organization, I would ask, have your compliance processes changed to address where the agents are living within your organization, and have employee protocols changed. Even if they're not running autonomously, do your employees know what to do with those things? Those would be two things I would want to know about. And then in terms of reading, I actually randomly ran into a conference called the AI Driven Leader in Austin, Texas. I saw some people from Austin on the line, but it was fantastic. It was a great collaboration of leaders, and they gave me this book, The AI Driven Leader. Jeff Woods was the author, and I read it on the flight back, and it just got me thinking a little bit differently about how I'm interacting with AI as a tool, as a professional. So
Awesome. Well, with that, I don't want to advertise, but I'm starting stop it. I put a timer on a website called My Favorite Things because I get asked all the time, but I haven't finished it, so I don't want to advertise it because then you'll make me finish. So I did a Substack post on my top things. So if you look at Nora Denzel on Substack, and I don't advertise anything I'm affiliated with, I get nothing from it. I just read everything and then I just recommend. But I will say NACD has some great stuff. They have a AI, let's see, it's not a certification, it's like a certificate in AI governance. And if your board is already an NACD member, it's free to use, or I don't know if it is free or not, but you're already an NACD member, might as well use it. And I contributed to it. I did not take that one yet, but the Blue Ribbon Commission paper is really good as well. And there's a lot more on the NACD website that you'll get. So with that, let me thank our panel. You guys were great. Thank you for letting me. And I was selected because I usually handle the opportunity side of AI, but my boards are like, okay, dude, you have to focus on the risk now because you're a little too aggressive. And so this was very helpful for me to learn what's going on in that environment. So I thank you very much. Thank you to NACD NorCal, and we'll have a good day.